Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Beyond the Deal, Real Estate, Finance, and Legislation, and how all of them commingle together to make your life better. I have here today with me two great friends, J.C. Porras. Juan Carlos Porras is his name, our state legislator in Tallahassee. I've known Juan Carlos before he was a state legislator or an attorney, and I'm very proud of him and all the moves that he's making in the state of Tallahassee in the state of Florida, in Tallahassee for all of us. Also with us is my great friend, Jose Lopez, CEO of Great Florida Lending, and how he has championed for the seniors community. So this episode is focused on seniors because we're going to discuss, JC is going to discuss about the legislation happening that he put forth, and that's going to happen January of 2026 for seniors 65 and over on property taxes. JC, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gina. Thank you guys for being here on the first ever episode of this podcast. Again, my name is Juan Carlos Porras. I have the honor of serving the Florida House of Representatives in District 119. That is the southwest portion of Miami-Dade County, areas of Kendall, the Hammocks, a lot of condos, a lot of HOAs that we're going to get into. I'm actually not an attorney. I just play one on TV, by the way. But I do know HOA condo law, I want to say better probably than most attorneys. And it is such a huge honor, not just to represent, obviously, my community, but to fight for seniors, fight for, obviously, our community here in Miami-Dade County. And I know we're going to talk about some of the legislation that's coming up now in legislative session now in January. So I'm super excited to be here and super excited to be, I think, the first guest on this podcast. So thank you again, Gina. Thank you for everyone here that's joining us.
No, thank you. Thank you, JC. JC, what can you say that's going to happen in legislation for taxes? Is it really going to happen? Because I have people on my ears saying to me, "Oh no, that's not going to happen. They'll never do it." But I do believe that 65 and over, that's happening because I think the governor even mentioned something like that.
Well, property tax relief is coming to Florida, Gina. In one way, shape, or another, the Florida House of Representatives has already put out several plans to ensure real property tax relief for Floridians. And I have the honor of proposing one of these 7 proposals that would eliminate completely all non-school related homestead exemption taxes or all homestead taxes to seniors over the age of 65 and older. I think this is, in my opinion, I might be biased, but I think this is the most common sense solution to make sure that the people that really deserve that relief are getting it, and we're obviously making sure that our law enforcement and our public education in our local cities and counties are not completely obliterated in the process.
That's fantastic. I think that's great news for all seniors listening today. Es una gran oportunidad para todos los de 65 años para arriba, los que tienen la sabiduría que este joven Juan Carlos Porras está trayendo una legislatura de no pagar los taxes, porque ustedes se lo merecen. Let's go now into the monster, which I call the monster. Why do I say it? Because HOAs, and I'm going to not be politically correct, there's been a lot of corruption in HOAs, homeowners associations, and one of the things that I commend JC, I call him JC, Juan Carlos Porras, is what he did with the hammocks. Go for it.
Yeah, Gina, I mean, I think everyone who lives in South Florida has heard of the Hammocks HOA Association, but if you haven't, it was the largest organized crime bust, I think, in our state's history since the 1980s. You had a single homeowner association, larger than many cities, I'd say, in the state, that was charged with RICO fraud. We had members of this homeowner association making fake shell companies and then putting homeowners fees through these companies and not doing a darn thing with any of it. And it happened for years and years and years. People were getting their money stolen outright. Money was shelved, and there had to be a real investigation by our state attorney's office, which I was able to help as part of that investigation back in 2022. And we found out that it was a massive operation. It was the board, the treasurer, their families, their friends were all a part of this massive scheme to defraud homeowners. And because of that, my priority in the legislature in Tallahassee for the past 3 years has been homeowner association reform, making sure that we have regulations and criminal penalties in place so that this never happens again. But Gina, we have opened a can of worms because there has been absolutely no oversight, absolutely no transparency when it comes to homeowners that live in both in condo associations and in homeowner associations, but especially in HOAs. And this year we're working on even more legislation to really crack down on that main issue of enforcement of some of these laws.
I applaud you for that. I really do applaud you for that. Y para nuestros que están oyendo en español, quiero que entiendan que él está fajándose muchísimo para las asociaciones, que muchas de ellas han sido corridas corruptamente, y él ha hecho un gran labor en los hammocks. And now let's go into the great state of Florida and the wealth migration in the great state of Florida. I mean, we have New Yorkers, New Jersey, Illinois, California coming in, and this is why our prices after COVID have skyrocketed. But it's what's happening here is a transformation in the state of Florida, especially Miami-Dade County. But we're not going to forget, and I'm sure our legislator on both sides of the aisle are not going to forget about affordable housing. It is critical for the workforce, the professionals. I mean, there's no first-time home buyer deals anymore.
Right.
So I want you, Juan Carlos, if you could kindly tell me what are the legislators on both sides of the aisle, because this has to be, I mean, we all have to work together for the people. That's the bottom line here. We cannot be fighting on things that cost you in your bottom line. What is affordable? What's going to happen with affordable housing?
Well, Miami is not affordable.
No,
at all,
that
Gina.
we all know that.
Let's all be frank. And I think the more time that passes, Miami is going to continue to be unaffordable. We have a massive influx of residents from states like New York, especially with the most recent elections, like California, that are fleeing these extreme liberal policies, if I may say so, and coming to the state of Florida. We are the model for conservative leadership, I think, in the country. And we have to make sure that we can still allow the residents that have been here for years and years and years to continue to be affordable, which is why we're enacting property tax relief, which is why we're going to continue on affordable housing. We had a program about a year or two ago called the Hometown Heroes Act that enacted real relief for people that are trying to be a first-time home buyer here in the state of Florida. If you are a firefighter, if you are a law enforcement officer, if you are a nurse or a teacher, you should have a no-interest loan from the state of Florida to make sure that you have that down payment for your house. And we did that about 2-3 years ago. It's been a massively successful program because we want to make sure that these people stay in Florida. Despite however many residents we grow, we still need our teachers. We still need our doctors, our nurses, our law enforcement. And, you know, it's so important, going back to the property tax discussion, that we don't forget about them. And which is why when we talk about property taxes and eliminating them either outright or for seniors over the age of 65, most of these proposals also have in place holding harmless our law enforcement funding, because obviously a lot of this property tax money goes to the counties and the cities that pay for their individual police departments. We have language in these bills that also says that no city or county can defund the police because of property tax relief. I think that's so important. But obviously, you know, going back to affordable housing as well, we need to do more, Gina. And I think as a legislature, we need to do more, and I think when with the next upcoming governor, hopefully now in 2026, that's going to be a priority as well.
Fantastic. And I hope also with the upcoming governor's race in 2026 that they'll take care of something else that's costing a lot of money, which is insurance, homeowners insurance. But we'll leave that for 2026. Let's see what goes on with that. Now we're going to turn to my dear colleague, friend, and my mentor, Jose Lopez, CEO of Great Florida Lending, who, thank you for sponsoring this first podcast of mine. I really do appreciate it. I'm very grateful. And I think it's a good segue, Jose. You're championing he's championing a great program for senior citizens. There's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of, you know, my dog told me, my cousin told me, my cat told me. No. Let's hear it from the professionals. Please chime in on what you're doing with your programs and through Great Fraud Lending and Seniors.
Well, Gina, I mean, I got to tell you, first of all, it's an honor to be a part of this podcast with you. I was very excited when you invited me and told me that you were launching, Behind the Deal, which I think is going to be a great program for the South Florida community. And I was very honored to be on your first show. I've been very impressed with Juan Carlos Porras, which I just met today. And a lot of the things, Juan Carlos, that you spoke about really touch home for me because I've been working with the senior community over the last 25 years, and I've seen their daily struggles. We talk about property taxes. We talk about the homeowners association dues and the special assessments, and even with the reverse mortgage, which is one of the programs that we use to help their quality of life, we see that a lot of times the associations, despite very high fees and dues and special assessments, don't have reserves sometimes to be able to provide the financial stability to allow these homeowners to secure financing, and and obviously insurance is also a struggle. But again, we'll leave that for the upcoming year and another discussion. But all these things create a higher standard of living costs for these seniors, and we see the daily struggle when they're trying to live on a fixed income.
And I think part of that, Jose, especially with the homeowner associations, you talk about mismanagement. In a lot of these cases, a lot of these buildings, there's just a complete disregard of maintenance, of making sure that everything is done properly, that there are reserve fundings, that there are milestone inspections, especially in the condominium world, that in some cases go overlooked for years or decades, which has really resulted in, obviously the catastrophe that we saw on Surfside here in Miami not too long ago. But the state has had to come down on a lot of these associations and say, you have to prioritize safety. And because of that, we've kind of seen now an affordability crisis because they've kicked the can down so far down the road that they're now forced to do these massive special assessments that seniors cannot afford, which is why we've had all these programs to try to ensure, ensure that there's prioritizing over the inspections, make sure that the cities and the counties are doing what they're supposed to be, but also making sure that there's some kind of relief for these special assessments. But a lot of that has to do, and we're gonna talk about a lot, is just the lack of enforcement of homeowner associations. There is nobody in the state that is coming down on these guys and making sure that they're following the law, making sure that they're doing everything that they're supposed to at a fiduciary level. So, I mean, that's something that, I think as a professional, I'm sure you see it all the time as well.
It's on a day-to-day basis that we come across it, and when we're talking to seniors, for example, one of the things that we were discussing, Gina, is the fact that we educate them, for example, on the fact that they may qualify at the age of 65 for the senior exemption, which gives them some help with their property taxes. But it's not enough, especially at 65 with the rising cost of living. Property owners, even the ones that have their mortgages paid off after 30 years, and I know there's conversation now of extending that, right? But even the ones that have, to some extent, achieved the dream of home ownership, the American dream, right, are at risk of losing their properties because they cannot afford the property taxes, the association, and the cost of maintaining the property, which is something that we don't talk about. But when you're a homeowner, you have to maintain that property. So when we sit with them and we're trying to assist them by securing programs that provide them with liquid funds like reverse mortgages, we also try to advise them on things that they can do to reduce their expenses. Because once you're on a fixed income, the practical solution is, how do you reduce expenses? And other than the senior exemption, there's not a lot else out there, especially with the associations, the rising fees, and the insurance. So having, meeting somebody that's championing now the possibility of getting rid of some portion of the property taxes for 65 and over, I think that that's going to really create a direct impact for seniors that they will appreciate. It will improve their quality of life, and it will make the dream of home ownership, the American dream, a reality finally for a lot of seniors. We've been dealing with this since the 80s. I was mentioning to you when we first met that the reason that the HECM program, which is the official name of reverse mortgages, the home equity conversion mortgage, the reason it came into existence in the 80s is because there was a rising tide of inflation and people were losing their homes. And the law was created, enacted by Congress, and signed by Reagan at the time as a solution for that. But it was a partial solution, right? We still have been struggling with rising costs of property taxes, insurance, homeowners associations for the last 40 years. And we need to find some permanent solutions, I think. And getting rid of property taxes for 65 and plus, I mean, you have my vote on that
Thank
one.
you.
So
Got
I
mine
think
too.
it's something that will
It's going to take
help.
everyone's vote, and this is not something, obviously, I say this every time. It's not up to me. It's not up to the legislature. We are putting this as a constitutional amendment that is going to be proposed to the voters now in 2026. And keep in mind, you guys, a constitutional amendment in the state of Florida, for it to pass, needs to be passed by over 60%, which is a very large threshold. And this is a major decision. This is going to shape the economy of our state for years, and I say decades to come, because this is the main way that some of these cities and counties get their funding. That's how they pay for roads. That's how they pay for the garbage maintenance. That's how they pay for all these programs. And I'm the first to say that local government does not manage their money well either. We know here in Miami-Dade County recently there was over a $400 million deficit that our county mayor said that we had, obviously, and the money appeared one day to the next. It was found somehow. But if we as Americans have to tighten our belts and our budgets as in our families every day, local governments and municipalities need to learn how to do the same. And I think that's why we're prioritizing property tax relief, but we're also doing it responsibly, because we also know how people need their garbage to be picked up, they need ambulances, and they need law enforcement when it's needed.
Well, the accountability has to be there. I think it has to be a component of something like getting rid of property taxes for a segment of the community. And it's a funny story, but when we're explaining the reverse mortgage program to seniors, I always get the question, which seems like, well, why are they asking this? But it's almost like common sense that at some point, property owners feel that they should stop paying property taxes. So I always get the question when I'm explaining the program. They say, well, do I have to continue paying property taxes if I do a reverse mortgage? And I kind of joke with them and I say, well, paying property taxes is a condition of being a U.S. citizen in the United States of America.
Right.
Whether your house is paid for or not, you pay property taxes. I just want to make clear that it's not a condition of the reverse mortgage, right? But, in that simplicity of that question lies the argument to why should I continue after 30, 40 years paying property taxes if the property is mine? And I think that there's, we kind of take it for granted that that's just the way things are, but, great men have always said question everything, right? And I think at least a question has to be posed. And once again, I thank you for your efforts to put that forth, and I hope people will listen to this and really try to understand that, especially younger generations, right? I think we need to pay our dues, and give back to the community and make sure that our seniors are being taken care of, and it's something that really comes to the heart of the matter for me, because I've seen so many seniors, and I see the way, I always joke with my wife that I have the time machine, right? Because I see the way the seniors in our community are living their golden years, right? And I see the struggles, and I see the ones that are being able to rise above the struggles and those that can't. And a lot of times it has to do with income and expenses. It comes down to the dollar sign, unfortunately, Yeah,
no, it's a great point. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, because when I filed this bill, I also keep in mind I'm the youngest member of the Florida House. I'm the first ever Gen Z member of the Florida House.
Gen Z.
That's right. So I will not see this benefit probably longer than any of my colleagues will. But I know that this is the right thing to do. These are the people that need it the most. They are the most vulnerable, and they are the most that are not willing or not able to recuperate that funding. I am 28 years old. I can go out and get another job. I can leave and go into the private sector at any point in time. But I know that our seniors, my grandparents, my parents, they do not have that same capability. So if anyone needs property tax relief, it is our seniors. That's what we need to be prioritized. And I think I would venture to say most people would agree with me on that. I think obviously there's a major conversation over abolishing all property taxes, which obviously we can talk about. But the reality is we need to start somewhere, and we need to start with the people that need it most. And I think it's the community that's over 65.
Yeah, and then if I can interject for a second, totally agree with that. The seniors 65 and over are the ones that really need it. And I understand some of my friends that are 55 and over are saying, I've owned my house for 30, 40 years, Gina. Please tell them can we be the next ones in line? I go, listen, hopefully you will be, but we have to start somewhere. And just think about it. In 10 years, you'll be able to not have property taxes if you're 55 or if you're over 55. So I think it's something that I'm definitely voting for. I'm a late baby boomer, the wealthiest and most successful generation, as my friend Jose Lopez always says. We have Generation C's who mirror a lot of the baby boomer mentality.
Not economically, that's for sure. But
and obviously we have Generation X. So you have 3 different generations here trying to help senior citizens, and not only them, all tax-paying Americans. And the key word is tax-paying Americans. And so I really commend you and applaud you for the work you're doing up in Tallahassee.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's so much work to be done. Obviously, our legislative session now begins in January. I'll be up in Tallahassee now next week for what we call committee weeks. I think we're going to start actually discussing and debating some of these property tax proposals and now in the upcoming week, now before December starts. So we're going to start having these debates with some of my colleagues. And it's very interesting. You see differing opinions from other parts of the state. I sit next to some of my colleagues that live in the Panhandle. And some of these property tax relief legislations would absolutely change their entire communities. There are cities and some counties with only a couple thousand people in them that what we call fiscally constrained counties. And what that means is very differently from Miami, which were humongous. These fiscally constrained counties their property taxes only fund emergency services and the very basic services that a community needs. But the question needs to be asked, do we need this many cities? Do we need this many counties? And that is a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of my colleagues because they have to go back to their communities and say, you might have a couple less mayors or you might have couple less government services as a whole. If you want to have property tax relief. And obviously, and this is just for seniors, if we abolish them entirely, you're talking about entire counties having to roll back to the state and being unincorporated counties that the state is the only form of government. And, I'm not an attorney. Again, I just play one on TV. I'm not, but I don't think anyone wants that. I think people want to have some kind of structure and not live in complete anarchy. Maybe I'm wrong. But this is why it's important we do it in phases, and this is why we try to prioritize and make sure that there are protections, because obviously we trust our voters, we trust our electorate to put people like myself and put other elected officials in elected office, but we should also be able to trust our voters to select the right amount of property tax relief that they should have. And that's something that's been asked of me. Why is the legislature putting in 7 proposals? Why not just one? But there's not just one person that runs for office every time. And this is not something that the legislature can just change from one day to the next. We need the approval of the legislature. So I think it's up to us to give the choice to the voters. We put every option on the table. We put overall non-school elimination. We put elimination for seniors over 65. And we've put also a myriad of other options like increasing the homestead exemption, changing how the homestead exemption works, providing portability for homestead exemptions as well. All of these options are something that the Florida House has already put together that's going to get passed. Obviously, we're waiting on the Florida Senate to see what if any, are they going to take up. And this is not something that we need the governor's approval of, but we need both sides to pass one of these resolutions over by a supermajority to put it on the ballot for the next election. So
Which is at 60% you mentioned, right?
well, that is after it gets put on the ballot. That amendment, when it gets put on November of next year, needs to be approved by over 60%. But for the legislature to be able to put it onto the ballot, I believe we need a 2/3 majority of both the House and the Senate to change the Constitution, which is what we're trying to do.
Well, these changes would really mean a whole lot to, again, the largest generation in American history to be retiring right now, which is the baby boomer generation. And unlike previous generations, the baby boomer generation is very mobile, which is why the reverse mortgage created the reverse mortgage for purchase program in 2010. So now you have seniors that can actually buy properties using financing from a reverse mortgage. Obviously, if the whole structure for either homestead exemption, because reverse mortgages are only available for homesteaded properties, its primary use, or whether it's a homestead exemption or whether you're 65 and plus and are going to qualify for some kind of exempt tax payment or maybe even portability of some sort, it will really help the baby boomer generation because they're not standing still. I mean, I always tell people, when you're thinking about the baby boomer generation, these are the guys that invented surfing and the internet, So it's not what you're thinking about. I mean, these guys, are doing Zoom meetings with me. They're inquisitive, they're shopping around, they understand technology, So it's a new generation, and they're not standing still. They have kids that live across the nation, and they'll spend 6 months in California, 6 months in Texas, 6 months in Florida, and they'll move around. So being able to help them with property taxes will allow that flow, which is good business across the board for everybody involved,
Absolutely. Does anyone anything else you want to chime
No,
in before
I wanted
we
to
close our beautiful first episode?
I just wanted to thank you again, Gina and Jose, for allowing me to be on your first program. It's a great honor. I love this space. I love what you guys are doing with this show. I hope to be back in the future when we get back from Tallahassee with our legislation. I would love to come back and talk even more in depth on some of the ideas that I have with homeowner association reform. Maybe we should ask another episode. Do we even need homeowner associations? Is there a need?
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's
so. I think that leaves some room for another episode, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, Juan Carlos. I wish you the best of luck. I hope you all your endeavors up there go well. I think it's going to really help our senior community, especially in South Florida, with the rising cost of living. Gina, I think this is a fantastic first show. I know the best is yet to come.
Amen.
And again, I appreciate the fact that you invited us to your first show. We feel honored.
Well, there's something baby boomers live by is loyalty and friendships and family, of course. And these are two friends from two different generations that have been making a difference throughout their professional careers. And what can I say? Thank you. I'm very grateful for all your insights today, because it's not only insights for me, but mostly for our community, that to stay engaged, to stay empowered, to stay knowledgeable. Knowledge is power. And I'm glad that we're being transparent with our community here in Miami-Dade County and throughout South Florida and anywhere else in the nation, because this impacts, we need to make some major changes, and I think this is the greatest country on the planet, and we need to protect it. So thank you both again.
Thank you,
This
Gina.
is Gina.Sosa, Beyond the Deal, Real Estate, Finance, and Legislation. Thank you again.